Have you ever found yourself in this moment? The very person who shattered you through cruel words, silent punishments, and hollow stares suddenly comes back with a "I miss you" text, an unexpected hug, or even a seductive invitation. Not because they regret what they did, not because they love you, but because they can't stand losing control. Welcome to my channel, where we expose the rawest truths about narcissistic abuse. In today's video, you won't just listen, you'll awaken. Because when a narcissist wants you back, it's not an act of love, it's a psychological ambush wrapped in false intimacy. They don't want forgiveness, they want submission. Why do they return after wrecking you? Why do they suddenly become charming, affectionate, even irresistible? And why does their comeback leave you feeling owned rather than loved? We'll unpack all of it, deeply, honestly, and with a kind of clarity that helps you see through the games you were never meant to play. So be sure to subscribe now and watch until the very end, because every insight in this episode could be what finally helps you break free from their toxic grip. It's time to reclaim your power and start writing your next chapter on your terms. Contrary to what you want to believe, the narcissist doesn't come back because they miss you, regret hurting you, or have finally realized your worth. No, they come back for one reason only. They can't stand losing control over you. In the narcissist's distorted world, love isn't about connection, it's about possession. You are supply, a tool they use to feel powerful, in control, and relevant. When you walk away, you don't just take the relationship with you, you shake the foundation of their inflated ego. Their return rarely comes with a genuine apology or a true desire to change. Instead, they rely on familiar tactics. Fake charm, sweet memories, a warm gaze, the very things that once made you fall. But this time, their goal isn't to make you happy. Their goal is to drag you back into the old cycle of control, where they manipulate your emotions and you bear the weight of their chaos. And the most dangerous part is they are very good at making you believe this is a second chance. Tactic 1. They revive beautiful memories to make you question reality. When a narcissist wants you back, the first thing they do is not apologize. They don't face the consequences of their actions, nor do they acknowledge the pain they've caused. Instead, they use a far more subtle weapon, a psychological smokescreen. They resurrect the beautiful memories. You might be caught off guard when they suddenly send you an old photo, a nostalgic song you used to share, or a simple message like, "I miss that night when you laughed at my silly joke." Make no mistake, these words are not random. They are calculated, because narcissists know one unshakable truth: positive memories can overpower logic. In that moment, your heart reacts before your mind catches up. The pain seems to fade momentarily, not because you've forgiven them, but because the familiarity of that sweet memory is disarming and dangerously seductive. Memories are one of the hardest things to fight, especially in relationships where you loved deeply and suffered silently. Narcissists understand this well. They don't need to change to get your forgiveness. They only need to make you remember. Because once you start revisiting those tender moments, you begin questioning your own decision. Was I too harsh? Maybe I overreacted. Maybe what we had was worth saving. And the moment you start doubting yourself, they've regained control. This is what psychologists call trauma bonding, a psychological attachment formed through repeated cycles of pain and intermittent relief. If you've been conditioned to expect love after cruelty, affection after rejection, your brain begins to associate these extreme emotional swings as normal. And when a narcissist triggers a beautiful memory, your brain floods with dopamine, making you feel as if you're falling in love again. But what you're really experiencing is a biological illusion, not genuine emotional safety. Sadly, most people don't realize this right away, because those memories don't just live in your mind, they live in your body. You don't just recall the feeling, you actually relive it. And emotions, especially those rooted in longing and nostalgia, have the power to make us fall into the oldest trap in the book: hope. You begin to hope that maybe this time it's real. Maybe they finally get it. Maybe they're ready to love you right. But what's the truth? The truth is they're not sorry. They're starving. When you walked away from that relationship, you didn't just regain your freedom, you cut off their emotional supply, the fuel they had been draining from you to feed their hollow sense of self. You're no longer the one they could manipulate, guilt trip, or use as an emotional crutch, right? And that loss doesn't make them realize your value. It makes them panic because they've lost control. So they come back, but not through growth or self-awareness. They come back by replaying the greatest hits of your relationship, painting a fantasy of what once was, suggesting that just a little more effort could bring it all back. They know you still feel. They know you still remember. And if they hit the right emotional note at the right moment, your pain will drown in your nostalgia, and that's the opening they need. The danger is, most of us are never taught how to defend against emotional manipulation that feels like love. We're told to watch out for red flags, for anger, silence, or betrayal. But no one warns us about kindness used as a weapon, especially when it's cloaked in memories that once brought joy. That's why so many survivors return to their abuser, not because they're weak, but because they're being manipulated by their own emotional wiring. So, what can you do? First, write down the truth. Document everything that actually happened. The gaslighting, the insults, the silent treatment, the nights you cried yourself to sleep, the moments you apologized just to keep the peace. Keep this record like a mirror for your future self, because the narcissist will never remind you of this part. But it's the part that will save you. Second, ask yourself a clear question. Am I missing them, or am I missing the person I once dreamed they could be? More often than not, we're not attached to who they were, but to the version of them we hoped they could become. If that version only lived in your imagination, you deserve someone else who will make that dream reality, not someone who repeatedly shattered it. Lastly, forgive yourself if you've ever replied to that message, revisited those memories, or entertained the idea that the past could somehow redeem the present. That's not failure. That's part of waking up. But now that you're awake, you have the right to say no. You have the right to remember everything and still choose not to go back, because the person who broke you cannot be the one to heal you. Tactic 2. They use intimacy as a final weapon of control. If reviving fond memories is the emotional hook, then intimacy becomes the final blow. When a narcissist senses that you are slipping from their control, they don't always yell, beg, or lash out. Instead, they often approach you with softness, sometimes through a sudden craving for closeness that seems rooted in love. But in truth, this isn't connection, it's a ritual of possession. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse have described this moment as a kind of spiritual violation. They couldn't say no, not because they consented, but because they were too emotionally shattered to resist. In that moment, they couldn't tell whether what was happening was love or something far more disturbing. And that is exactly where the narcissist wants you, vulnerable, disoriented, and open to being conquered. The truth is, physical intimacy with a narcissist isn't about love, it's about power. They aren't trying to repair the relationship, they're trying to reclaim territory. They aren't seeking emotional connection, they want psychological control. And what's most disturbing is when you are at your absolute lowest, right after they've emotionally gutted you. They know you're hurting. They know you've been crying, questioning your worth, doubting your instincts. That's when they come close. They touch you like they care. They hug you like they've changed. They hold you just long enough for you to wonder, maybe this is love? But if you're not careful, you'll find yourself swept into a moment that your body didn't consent to, even if your mind couldn't fight back. Biologically, intimacy releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. But in relationships with narcissists, oxytocin doesn't create safety, it reactivates dependency. You feel attached to the very person who broke you. You feel softness where there should be warning. And then you turn on yourself. Why did I let this happen? But you didn't let it happen. You were biologically hijacked. The narcissist knows they can no longer control you with charm or logic, so they use your body as the final battleground. With them, physical closeness is not affection, it's a performance of ownership. It's the final act before they vanish again. For some survivors, that one last night leads not to healing, but to emotional collapse. And the pain isn't just physical or emotional, it's symbolic. You realize you weren't touched as someone beloved. You were used as a final possession, a reminder to them that even at your strongest, they could still pull you back into submission. And that's more damaging to your self-worth than any insult ever could be. So what should you do when they use intimacy to manipulate you? First, set clear boundaries. No one last goodbye. No, I just need a hug. If someone needs to touch you to end things, it's not about closure. It's about control. Walk away. Second, distinguish emotion from biology. Feeling moved doesn't mean it's love. Feeling soft doesn't mean they deserve another chance. Remember, no rush of dopamine or oxytocin is enough to erase years of betrayal. Third, trust your intuition. If you walk away from a moment with them feeling more ashamed, more hollow, more confused, that wasn't love. That was a violation. Love doesn't leave you feeling like you've been used. Love doesn't arrive when you've just collapsed emotionally, only to carve a deeper wound into your soul. Remember this, when a narcissist wants you back and uses intimacy to do it, they're not seeking love, they're seeking victory. They don't want reconnection, they want proof that they still own a piece of you. But the truth is, you don't belong to them. You are not a body to be used when someone feels emotionally empty. You are a whole human being with value, with choice, and with the right to say no. Tactic 3. They play the victim to make you feel guilty. When the first two tactics fail, when resurrecting sweet memories doesn't soften you, and when physical intimacy can't breach your boundaries, the narcissist reaches for their most manipulative card. They play the victim. With skillful emotional performance, they completely shift the narrative. No longer the one who hurt you, they now become the one who's been hurt, the one who was abandoned, the one drowning in grief because you left them. They cry. They confess deep emotional wounds. They say no one ever loved them the way you did. They tell you stories of childhood trauma, unhealed pain, and how your absence has pushed them into darkness. And here's the thing. They're not always lying, at least not entirely, but the danger lies in how they weaponize the truth to justify their cruelty. They blur the line between accountability and sympathy. And the moment you start to feel for them, your instincts become compromised. You no longer see them as the one who harmed you, but as someone you need to rescue. And that's when you walk back in. They don't need to admit what they did. They just need to make you feel bad for leaving, that you abandoned someone in pain, that you were too cold, too unforgiving, that if you were truly kind and compassionate, you wouldn't walk away from someone who is hurting. And because you are empathetic, because you do have a good heart, because you don't want to be the villain, they use that goodness against you. You give them another chance. You reopen the door you worked so hard to close. But what you don't realize is, every word, every tear, every trembling hug was crafted to return you to your old role, not as a lover, but as the one responsible for their emotions. This is classic role reversal, a psychological manipulation tactic often referred to as moral gaslighting. They don't just deny what they did. They make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. They frame your boundaries as betrayal. They remind you of all the good you did for them, not to be grateful, but to convince you that you should stay, must stay, because no one else will ever love them like you did. And if you're not careful, you'll fall into the rescuer role again, the one who sacrifices their own well-being to heal someone who never truly wanted to be healed. The truth is, they don't need your love. They need your presence to maintain their victim narrative. Because once you come back, they get to say, see, I wasn't the bad guy. They came back to me. And the moment you accept this role they've written for you, they return to who they've always been. The softness disappears. The tears dry up. And once again, you're left, confused, humiliated, and this time with an added layer of shame for falling back into the trap. This is the cycle they hope you'll never escape. A performance scripted with false emotion, acted out with real memories, and directed by a desperate hunger for control. But you can escape. You can see the whole picture, not just the scene they want you to focus on. And once you realize your compassion has been exploited, once you understand that love does not mean sacrificing yourself to save someone who refuses to save themselves, that is the moment you reclaim your power. Tactic 4. They turn you into the villain to erase their guilt when a narcissist realizes that their emotional tactics no longer work, when sweet memories fail to soften you, when physical intimacy doesn't break your defenses, and even playing the victim doesn't draw you back. They pivot to a more brutal, calculated strategy. They rewrite the story and cast you as the villain. This is no longer a plea for reconciliation. It's an attack aimed at destroying your sense of truth, your dignity, and your grip on reality. They begin subtly. They don't shout or accuse outright. Instead, they plant seeds of doubt. They remind you that the relationship ended because you were too sensitive, that if only you had been calmer, things wouldn't have gone so badly. They don't speak of what triggered your reactions, only your reactions themselves. They exaggerate the one time you raised your voice and conveniently ignore the 100 times they gave you the silent treatment, mocked your feelings, or gaslighted you. Gradually, they twist the narrative so that you become the problem in a story they've carefully crafted. They may start telling others that you were unreasonable, emotionally unstable, even abusive. And if you try to defend yourself, if you dare speak the truth, they use your defense as proof. See? Look how obsessed they are. Look how dramatic. The more you try to reclaim your voice, the more they spin it against you. Eventually, exhaustion sets in. You begin to wonder, maybe I was too harsh, maybe I wasn't patient enough, maybe I did make things worse. And that's the trap. This is the most insidious psychological ambush a narcissist can deploy, not just controlling your emotions, but warping your entire understanding of what really happened. Because once you accept that you're the one to blame, they not only reclaim control, they also absolve themselves of any accountability. And with that power shift, they may return to you, not with an apology, but with entitlement. I'll give you a chance to fix what you broke. They're not seeking forgiveness. They're seeking submission. If you accept the rewritten narrative and step into the role of the guilty one, then you're no longer their partner. You're the one held responsible for managing their fragile ego. They can hurt you again and again, and you'll feel like you don't have the right to protest, because clearly it was all your fault to begin with. What makes this tactic so dangerous is that it doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in, quietly, persistently. From offhand comments like, "you always overreact," to cutting statements like, "no one could ever stay with someone like you for long." These remarks slowly erode your confidence, cloud your judgment, and eat away at your ability to trust your own feelings. Until one day, you're not just hurting, you're no longer sure you're allowed to hurt. But here's the truth. You were never the problem. You were the one who tried, the one who cared, the one who stayed hopeful longer than you should have. Walking away wasn't abandonment. It was an act of self-preservation. If someone needs to rewrite history in order to erase their guilt, then they were never truly sorry in the first place. Tactic 5, the disappear-reappear cycle, haunting you like a ghost that won't leave. Just when you think peace has finally arrived, when the silence has lasted long enough for your breath to steady and your heart to feel safe again, they return. No more late-night texts, no more watching your stories on social media, no more voice slipping into your dreams. You start reclaiming your rhythm, step by step, and then they show up, out of nowhere, unannounced, without warning. Like a ghost of your past that refuses to move on, they appear with a message that seems harmless. "I dreamed about you last night, hope you're doing okay, or just wanted to see if you're all right." But hidden beneath those casual words is a calculated attempt to reopen the door into your life, one you've worked so hard to shut. This tactic isn't about love, it's about disruption. They can't stand the thought that you're doing fine without them, that your silence isn't rooted in pain but in healing, that you might be moving on. The reappearance has little to do with affection and everything to do with regaining psychological access to what they've lost. Your attention, your emotional energy, your vulnerability. The quieter you become, the more invisible you are to them, the more unhinged they feel. Because in their world, your distance feels like a threat to their control. Many survivors fall into this trap, thinking maybe they really do miss me, maybe they've changed, or maybe this is the closure we never had. But each time, the return doesn't end the story. It restarts the cycle. The same rhythm plays out: hope, confusion, disappointment. The promise of change fades, and you're left right where you started, wounded, unashamed for letting them back in. This tactic is subtler than the others. It doesn't come with big emotions or explosive manipulation. It comes with just enough presence to destabilize your peace. A missed call, a vague message, a seen notification on an old conversation. These become the whispers that shake your emotional ground. Not because of what they said, but because their presence alone reopens the wound. Psychologists call this breadcrumbing, dropping tiny pieces of attention to keep someone emotionally tethered, even if there's no intent to truly reconnect. The narcissist doesn't want you to move forward. They want you to linger, to wonder, to wait. And every time you respond, even just a little, they disappear again, leaving you in confusion and self-doubt. So what should you do? Don't react impulsively. A message isn't an apology. A missed call isn't a sign of transformation. A checking-in text isn't love. It's a test to see if you're still emotionally available. Remind yourself, true peace never arrives through interruption. Someone who genuinely cares doesn't haunt your life with silence and vague appearances. They don't come and go like ghosts, reappearing just to stir up what's already settled. They don't return to see if you've forgotten them. They come to build something real. And if they're not building, they're interrupting. Let your silence be your power. You don't need to scream, defend, or explain. Your lack of response is your boundary. And every time you refuse to let them back in, you send a message louder than words. My peace no longer depends on who leaves or returns. It belongs to me now. Tactic 6, the grand illusion. I've changed, this time it's real. Not all narcissists return with empty words, but for the more sophisticated ones, a promise becomes the most dangerous weapon. After trying everything, emotional memory hooks, intimacy, victimhood, ghosting, reappearances, if you still stand your ground, they will deploy their ultimate tactic: I've changed. It's not just a phrase, it comes with a well-rehearsed performance. They may tell you they've started therapy, even if it was just one session, post deep quotes on social media, or suddenly begin sharing new insights they've supposedly gained. They'll tell you they've reflected deeply, that losing you was a wake-up call. They'll look you in the eyes and say, this time, I won't hurt you. And if you're in a vulnerable stage, craving hope that everything wasn't meaningless, those words can pierce the deepest part of you. Because deep down, you want to believe. You once loved the version of them they showed you long ago, and you once dreamed that if they could only change, if they could understand your pain, then maybe the love you gave could be salvaged. So when they say they've grown, that they get it now, that they've seen the light, what you're hearing isn't just their voice. You're hearing the echo of your old hope. That's what makes this trap so seductive, the illusion of change. A narcissist doesn't need to change for real. They only need to look like they have. They know you're smart, cautious, and wounded. So they don't come back as their old self. They return as the upgraded version, shaped exactly like the person you always wished they would become. They seem more understanding, more apologetic, more accountable. They say all the right things, the very things you once begged them to hear. But remember this, real change doesn't happen in a few weeks of silence. Real transformation doesn't begin just because you left. Growth requires deep, sustained, painful internal work. It demands facing their own damage, not constructing a polished facade to win you back. The narcissist doesn't change for you. They change appearances to reclaim you. And once you believe them and re-enter that relationship, you'll soon realize it was all theater. The things you thought were new are just familiar tactics in fancier packaging. The words you hoped were real turn out to be tools. And once you've been back long enough, they no longer need the mask. The old behavior returns, sometimes even worse. Because now, they know, you've forgiven once before. What cuts deepest isn't just the betrayal. It's being betrayed through the very thing you had hoped was true. Because every time you forgive, you don't just lose trust in them, you lose a little bit of faith in your own judgment. So what should you do? First, stay alert. Change is not measured by words, but by patterns sustained over time. Someone who hurt you cannot be considered healed just because they say they've thought things through. Real change requires proof. and you are not obligated to be the monitor of their progress. Second, observe from a distance. If you see them truly living differently, treating others with respect, taking responsibility, no longer manipulating or harming those around them, and they do this consistently without needing your presence to witness it, then maybe, just maybe, it's real. And finally, trust your intuition. If your heart still feels heavy, if your mind remains on high alert, if your sleep is restless at the thought of them, your body is telling you something your brain doesn't want to admit. Tactic 7. They flaunt a new relationship to make you feel fully replaced. Your silence unsettles them. Your strength threatens their control. When words, tears, or the illusion of change no longer work, the narcissist turns to a crueler, more calculated strategy. They go public with someone new. Not after a respectful amount of time that suggests healing, but right when they sense you're finally starting to recover. Suddenly, they appear on social media, smiling hand in hand, posting carefully crafted photos, love-filled captions, subtle jabs disguised as inspiration. It all seems so happy, so genuine, so complete. But it's not love. It's psychological warfare. Every image, every post is meant to send one message. I don't need you anymore. You've been replaced. Make no mistake. This isn't about celebrating a new beginning. It's about provoking you. The narcissist doesn't care about the new person. That individual is simply a prop, a tool used to elicit pain, jealousy, and self-doubt in you. They want you to feel discarded, forgotten, defeated, and most importantly, they want you to question your worth. Why is this tactic so powerful? Because you're human. You loved them. And now you're watching them give to someone else the very things you longed for: affection, attention, public validation. Your mind starts asking the same torturous questions. Why couldn't they treat me that way? What does the new person have that I didn't? Was I the reason it didn't work? But those questions are rooted in a false belief that what you're seeing is real, that their new relationship is healthy, that they finally changed. The truth is, you're watching a performance. The stage is social media, and the audience is you. And if you don't react, they'll escalate. More posts, more affection, more visibility. Because this isn't about building love, it's about breaking your healing process. It's brutal, but it's the truth. The new person isn't the one, they're just the next source of supply, a temporary placeholder to fill the emotional void you left behind. And once that new person no longer reacts the way the narcissist desires, the cycle will repeat. Idealization, manipulation, devaluation, discard, because their core hasn't changed. So what should you do? Do not react. Don't message them. Don't stalk their profiles. Don't analyze the new person, because every response feeds their ego and fuels their game. Let your silence speak for itself. Remind yourself of the truth. Someone who truly loved you wouldn't need to parade someone else in front of you. And if they moved on too fast, too publicly, too dramatically, that's not love. That's emptiness looking for a witness. True happiness doesn't scream for validation. Insecurity does. Tactic 8. They use others to send messages and sneak back into your life indirectly. Not every narcissist returns with their own voice. Sometimes they don't show up directly because they've discovered a far more subtle, low-risk, and often effective tactic. They re-enter your life through other people. They use mutual friends, shared acquaintances, coworkers, or even social media to send accidental but very intentional messages. This is covert re-entry, quiet, calculated, and dangerous. A mutual friend might casually say, "He still talks about you sometimes," or "She's been pretty down since the breakup." Someone might randomly ask, "Hey, do you still talk to them?" Or maybe a strange account starts following you, liking your vulnerable posts. Each of these acts seems harmless, tiny, even forgettable, but they're actually tests. The narcissist wants to know if you've truly moved on, if you're still angry, if your emotional door is still cracked open. If you respond even just a little, they know they still have a chance. And if you don't, they'll escalate. An old friend might invite you to coffee and just happen to mention how your ex is still single. Another person might drop a memory from back in the day. All of it is designed to blur the emotional boundaries you've fought so hard to build. Make no mistake, this isn't coincidence. It's strategic manipulation. The narcissist knows that if they came back directly, your guard would go up. But if they come through safe channels, through people you trust, they can slip past your defenses. And once you soften, once you open even slightly, you may not realize that you're standing on the edge of another toxic cycle. The danger of this tactic is that it makes you believe you're the one making the choice, that you're opening up out of your own free will. But you were never given a real choice. You were nudged, surrounded, fed half-truths and gentle suggestions, all crafted to make you wonder, maybe they still care. The truth is, they don't care about you. They care about whether you're still emotionally available to feed their need for control and attention. So what should you do? Enforce your boundaries, not just with the narcissist, but with the people they use as extensions. Not everyone means harm, but that doesn't mean you have to receive everything they bring. Be clear, I'd rather not hear updates about them. And if someone can't respect that, reevaluate how close they need to be to your healing space. Listen to your intuition. If something feels off, if a message seems suspiciously well-timed or emotionally loaded, trust that instinct. You don't need evidence. Your feeling is enough. And most importantly, no one has the right to re-enter your life through the back door. Anyone who shattered you does not deserve to sneak back in through a window you didn't open. By now, you may have realized one undeniable truth. When a narcissist comes back, it is never about love. It's about their obsession with control. Whether they use words or silence, charm or provocation, false change or public displays of affection, every tactic has one purpose: to pull you back into a cycle where they are the center and you are the one orbiting around their emotional needs. But you are no longer the person you once were. You've learned to recognize the patterns, to set boundaries, to protect your peace. You've lived through the darkness long enough to understand that the light doesn't come from them. Light doesn't come from them. It comes from within you. The truth is, you are not required to be their healer. You are not cruel for choosing to love yourself first. And you are under no obligation to reopen a door that once led you into emotional hell, just because someone says, "I've changed." If you're facing the moment when they come back, or fearing that they might, remember this: you don't owe them a reaction. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them another chance to hurt you. Your silence, your strength, your steady walk forward, that is the most powerful ending you can give. Not for them, for you. And if this video has awakened something in you, let it be a turning point, a moment of clarity, a declaration of strength. I do not belong to the place that once made me doubt my own worth. Subscribe to this channel, share this video with someone who needs it, and leave a comment if you've ever faced someone like this. You are not alone, and you deserve healing, not manipulation.